Welcome to another episode of Dear Parents. Today, we have three different things that we're going to talk about. First, we're going to talk about protein, and not just like you need more protein the way that all the people on Instagram, TikTok, and podcasts say that adults need protein. We're going to talk about what protein does for our children and then ways to get more protein into their diet without buying all of the tubs of protein and trying to sneak it into their drinks and all those sorts of things. The second is we're going to talk about distraction. We live in a very distracting world, and I just have some thoughts around how to actually protect your attention so that you can focus on what really matters. And then the third is going to be a question from a parent. So parents that are on my Dear Parents Substack can actually submit questions. And so we're going to get to hear from a mom who's having difficulty with sleep in her 2, almost 3-year-old and talk through how I would approach that as a pediatrician, as a parent, and how we actually did it in our own house. So let's get started. All right, let's talk about protein for a few minutes. Now, I want to first and foremost tell you that I know everybody is talking about protein right now for adults and how you need more protein, and all the influencers have their protein powders. Even Mel Robbins has a protein powder now, and I get it that like you're being constantly bombarded with all of the protein things. At the end of this, I'm going to tell you that your child does not need supplemental protein like from powders and those sorts of things, and that I would encourage you instead to focus on adding protein to the food that they eat and the food that they like so that they're able to get those nutrients in. Now, from a what does protein do for me standpoint, what I want you to think about is as protein as a building block. So it's like the Legos. Now, these are firm foundation like Legos. You've stepped on Legos. You know how strong they are. They are an important part of the building blocks for our day and for our brain. And so first thing in the morning is the most important time to get protein into your child. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is from a blood sugar standpoint. So from a blood sugar standpoint, protein helps to stabilize your child's blood sugar so that it doesn't go up and down all day long. Imagine that you have a donut or a waffle or a sugary cereal or something like that. What's going to happen is you're going to get that instant energy boost as those carbohydrates get digested. Your body is going to say, whoa, we just got a lot of sugar. So what should we do? We should release more insulin. And insulin is going to get released over the next couple of hours after having that really sugary breakfast. And what's going to happen then is that insulin helps to drive down your blood sugar. Think about a diabetic. A diabetic, their blood sugar goes up. They inject themselves with insulin. Their blood sugar goes back down. Your child eats a sugary breakfast. Their blood sugar goes up. Then their insulin is released and their blood sugar goes back down. And what happens, especially with a sugary breakfast or a big sugary breakfast, is that it can overcorrect. So you've had this before where you've eaten a big breakfast and then you're sweaty and you're a little bit anxious and you're feeling a little lightheaded. That is happening at a smaller scale level to your child throughout their morning when they've started their day with a big sugary breakfast. Now, our adrenal gland, which is like one of the glands in our body that releases a stress hormone, adrenaline, it will see that and think, whoa, this is stressful. I need to release stress hormone. I need to release cortisol. I need to release adrenaline because I have to get this blood sugar back up because it's getting to a dangerous level. And I'm worried that our blood sugar is going to get too low. So we're going to release cortisol. We're going to release adrenaline. And what that's going to do is it's going to make your child wired. They're not just going to be sluggish. They're not going to be like falling asleep at their desk because their blood sugar is low. They're going to have adrenaline on board. Their blood sugar is going to be low. Their cortisol is going to be elevated. And what that's going to do is it's going to make them hard for them to focus. It's going to make them fidgety. It's going to make them want to move. It's going to want them, their brain is saying, look for a source of sugar. Look for something that's going to help calm me down. And it's really hard to pay attention. It's really hard to do what we're supposed to do and make the good choices that we're supposed to make when our blood sugar is all over the place. Now contrast that with protein. Protein provides both a source of blood sugar because protein can be converted into blood sugar. It also helps to stabilize your child's blood sugar so that, yes, they had a little bit of sugariness in their breakfast, but they had protein as well, which helps to stabilize everything out so we don't have those rapid swings. It also supplies them with amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks that go to the body to build muscle, which is why everybody and their mom thinks that you need more protein, you adult need more protein in your diet is to build more muscle and all those sorts of things. And protein is good. It's not like I don't think it's as amazing as everyone touts it for healing every single thing, and you just need more and more protein. There's an upper limit of how much protein you need. But for children, it helps with their bone and muscle mass and those sorts of things. But it also is converted into neurotransmitters in their brain. So part of the process for dopamine synthesis, I want my child to sit still and focus during the day. I want them to run around and play, but I also want them to be able to do their work and learn and color and talk with friends and all the different things that require attention and focus. Dopamine is created through amino acids. Tyrosine is converted to dopamine, and that is what gives our brain the ability to focus and pay attention. And so we need a source of tyrosine, and you don't want to just go to is there still GNC? I don't even know. It seems like it's all online these days, but I can imagine that if you went to GNC, you would find one of those big tubs, like a creatine tub, but it's full of tyrosine, and it says it helps you with brain focus or something like that. You don't want to do that because it's the synthetic version, obviously. It's got lots of fillers in it. It is expensive. It is hard to take, and also can cause a lot of other side effects when you give that specific amino acid. What you want to do is just get them the protein source. Proteins have tyrosine in them. It gets converted into dopamine, and it fuels those areas of the brain that allow our child to focus and pay attention. The other one is tryptophan. Tryptophan is converted in the brain to serotonin. Serotonin helps with our mood and regulating our tiredness and our alertness. And tryptophan is also converted to melatonin, which helps with our circadian rhythm and sleep and all those sorts of things. Plenty of good reasons that you want your child to get enough protein on a regular basis. So let's talk actionable now when it comes to like how much protein should we get? Because they say protein, but like how much am I actually supposed to get my kid? And then what do I actually feed them that is rich in protein that they will actually eat? We have 6 kids at our house. We've had loads of different breakfast options over the 16 years now of parenting. When it comes to the number of grams of protein, you'll see a wide variety, and it's hard for me to keep straight the number of grams of protein that any individual kid should get. In the US, we think in pounds, but when you look online, it usually talks about 1 to 1.5 grams per kilogram, and nobody knows their kid's kilogram weight. Siri does. You can ask Siri and for these sorts of things. But I usually just try and think in the broad sense, half of my child's weight. So if my child weighs 80 pounds, half of that is 40. Around 40 grams of protein throughout the day would be the right amount. Now, by and large, I'm going to say those numbers, but I'm also going to say that you don't need to track their macros. We should just try and see what happens when we get them extra protein. You'll see the benefits and you say, oh, okay, that makes sense. I changed up their breakfast and the morning went much better. I changed up their breakfast and the teacher said, hey, at 10:30, he usually crashes and he was doing great all the way until lunchtime today. Those are what I would track rather than the specific macros is what can we see in our child that might be attributable to not having enough protein on board or starting the day with a sugary breakfast or not getting protein after school. If instead of you're at 37 grams of protein today, we need to get you 6 more. Here's things with 6. That is no fun, and that causes a lot more issues when it comes to the tracking of the macros and the tracking of the weight and all those different things that we want to avoid for our child. So I would just try and encourage more protein intake and then see the results in action. So first thing in the morning, if you can get a good 15, 20 grams of proteins in, assuming your child is school age or thereabout, that's a great way to start the day. Now, how do we do that at our house? We have basically 3 breakfast options. One is peanut butter toast, which peanut butter has a lot of protein in it and it tastes great, paired with scrambled eggs. And so one of our children, he is 12 now, he is in charge of scrambled eggs in the morning. He scrambles, he cracks the eggs, he whisks them up, he turns the stove on, he lets the pan heat up, he puts the oil on. He does that entire process and he loves it and it's his thing. And I would encourage you to, once your child is of an age, or maybe even before you feel like, are they at the right age to do this, is to give them that task. It's not a chore. It's his responsibility, his job, and we count on him to do that. Now, occasionally, if he sleeps in or something like that, I will do it. But by and large, that's like his task from start to finish every day is scrambling the eggs. So we get scrambled eggs, we get peanut butter toast. The other thing that some of our kids prefer would be like Greek yogurt, which is another great source of protein. We do let them put like fruit or granola or something along those lines, chocolate chips, if we're feeling generous, on top of the Greek yogurt. But that is how our kids start the day when it comes to the foods that they eat. So I think eggs are a great source. I think peanut is a great source. One of our kids, it's too expensive, but we had some smoked salmon once and they wanted that, which we did for a short period of time. But when you have 6 kids, you don't do smoked salmon on a regular basis. Now, what you could do too to get more protein in is something like a smoothie. I always worry that smoothies are mostly sugar and mostly non-complex, like simple carbohydrates that power the smoothies. But you can find some high protein smoothies that would be a better choice that maybe are made with Greek yogurt or something along those lines. They don't have a lot of added sugar because you don't want to just have them have essentially juice every morning as their source unless it has a lot of protein in it. Okay, so that's one time that you can get protein into your child. Then the other time that it's really critical to get protein in is after school. They come home, they've held it all together all day. It's been a long day for all of the different reasons. It's been a while since lunch. I hate to be like kids these days, but kids these days eat lunch so early. Oh my gosh, when I see patients in the office, it's like 11:15 and they're missing lunch, or they've already had lunch at 11:15. They get to 4 o'clock. They haven't had a snack. They are low in protein. They're dehydrated. Of course, they're going to have a difficult time because when I'm hungry, when I'm dehydrated, when I've been holding it together all day, of course, I'm going to have a difficult time. So what you want to do is get them protein as quickly as possible when you see them after school. That might be a simple protein bar. That might be a string cheese. That might be yogurt. That might be peanut butter on something. Get them protein that they will eat after school before you have any demands upon them, before you tell them to do their homework, before you ask how their day is or get them to tell you about something or lecture them about something that didn't go right this morning. Get protein on board. Give them a little bit of a break. You will see a huge difference. And this is something that, like I said, instead of tracking your macros, how about you just track their mood a week with last week? Last week, we were doing sugary snacks after school and goldfish and Cheerios or whatever it might be. And they were hangry and upset all the way until dinner time, and the evening was a mess. This week, we subbed that out for whatever protein source that we can think of that we know that they'll eat, and look at how different the evenings went. I don't have to track macros to see that we're all in a much more pleasant mood. Things are going much better for us because of that one little switch. So big picture thoughts when it comes to protein is your child needs more protein on a regular basis, not to build up muscle mass, not to make for stronger bones, but to help fuel their brain so that they can have the opportunity to play, to learn, to think without their blood sugar all over the place, without being low in dopamine and serotonin or those other neurotransmitters that they need to function at their best. Find out ways to get more protein into their diet. And if you have ideas, drop them in the comments on my Substack for this post, because I'm sure other parents out there are struggling to figure out how to get more protein into their child and would love the opportunity to hear from other parents in the trenches of what you're doing and what's working. Okay, I really like data. I like using data to drive decisions, especially when it's long game stuff like our behaviors and how our child is doing. And in children with ADHD, it can be particularly difficult to know where are the strengths that my child has, where are the challenges that we're facing right now, what does it look like as we put new practices into place to see how things improve. So I created what I call the ADHD Profile and Compass. This is a tool that looks at all 4 domains of ADHD. So yes, hyperactivity, yes, inattention and impulsivity, but also emotional regulation and executive function. This tool lets you see what your child's current domain issues and challenges and strengths are. And then as we put new practices into place, whether it's sleep, whether it's screens, whether it's supporting their biology, new parenting or school strategies, you get to see over time how their domain changes and how their profile improves with what we're actually doing. If you're looking for a whole child approach and a whole child evaluation when it comes to their ADHD, check out my ADHD Compass. If you go to drphilboucher.com/ADHD Compass or check the link in the show notes, you can find that and learn so much more about your child and how you can actually help them thrive with their unique brain wiring. I want to talk for a minute about distraction. I do the Peloton bike from time to time, and Alex Toussaint is my main instructor. I never plan enough time, and he does a high intensity interval training for 20 minutes. That is my main thing. Like, there's lots of great instructors there. Some of them are a little bit distracting to me. And he's really motivational without judging or shaming or guilting you into doing things. But one of the things that he says is, this ain't daycare. This ain't daycare is a common thing that you will hear Alex say during the rides, which to me says, you decide what you put in and you decide what you get out. You decide where to put your time and your energy and your attention. And right now, as parents, we get to decide where we give our time and energy and attention. And I recently heard a verse from the Bible that is from John that said, when you were younger, you used to dress yourself and go where you wanted. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands and someone will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. Which I think of similar to daycare. Like when you're in daycare, somebody else tells you where to go. When you are elderly and in a nursing home or, getting help and those sorts of things, people will move you to places that you don't necessarily want to go. Now, I know that this Bible verse is also about Peter's martyrdom, but I'm just a simple guy. And so I'm taking it from the idea of, okay, when you're in daycare or when you're in an old age, people will lead you where they want. But until then, you get to decide. Now, I get to talk with a lot of parents that are often feeling scattered. They're feeling pulled from thing to thing or overstretched. They're exhausted. They're pulled into scrolling as escapism. And really, in doing so, they're looking for some comfort. They're looking for some distraction. But they're being led where they do not want to go. You're being led where you do not want to go. You're being led where somebody else has decided, I'm going to make them give attention to. And I'm very guilty of this as well. There's no judgment here. I remember times where I would be standing in the kitchen at 5:30 in the morning. I got up early to exercise and I'm standing in the kitchen reading comments or swiping through Instagram reels or something along those lines. And I'm like, where did that time go? Our brains are not designed to experience so much of what this offers us so quickly. You can, in just a couple of minutes while waiting for your coffee to brew, experience tragedy and injustice and violence and new baby pictures and tragedy and injustice and violence and guilt tripping and tragedy and a funny cat video and a conspiracy theory. And our brains were never designed to take in that much information and to roller coaster the way it does. If you think about I try and, in pediatrics and parenting, try and think about us from an evolutionary standpoint too. We didn't have this constant worldwide news where we know everything that's going on in the entire world at the tip of our fingers, or in a 2-minute coffee break, we can learn things that would take weeks or months to get to us, if it ever did, before this new information age that's just the information overwhelm age. Those images that we see, those videos, those injustices, those tragedies, those funny moments, they linger in our minds for hours and for days. And that's on top of all the other challenges that are before us at any given minute. And so what I hear from a lot of parents is like, I got upset, I got frustrated. I said, finally, I'm going to delete the app. And so, they'll delete the app. And people will think that I'll just tell them to delete the app. And I actually don't think that that's a very good strategy. Because what happens is you delete the app, you're good for a couple of days, it feels good, but then something drags you back. You need to look up a recipe. You need to see a friend's new baby pictures or something like that. You get right back into it. And I've seen this with friends a million times over where they're like, yeah, I'm done with Facebook, I'm done with Instagram, I'm done with TikTok. But then something comes up and they need it more and more, or they go back to it and then they just go into those old habits. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to put some boundaries in place to help protect ourselves and to protect our brain. And in doing so, protect our attention for us as adult humans, for us as parents, for the attention that we give our children and the presence of mind that we give our children. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at, where is this a struggle for me? And it might be, I have trouble falling asleep at night, or I scroll and swipe until I fall asleep at night. But those images affect me and getting to sleep and then staying asleep, and the dreams and the thoughts that I have are all affected by that. Or maybe there's a lot of chaos in the morning and I find myself having experienced all of the world's news when I first wake up in the morning, and then the chaos of my home, and it's hard to be patient and all those sorts of things. We're going to put strategies in place that help put boundaries around those areas where we're experiencing challenge. And so there's two things that I recommend that people do and that we do in our house that really help. One, this one's super easy, is you put your phone into Grayscale. And I'm going to show you what Grayscale phone looks like. It is so much more boring and so much less enticing to have your phone in Grayscale. And what I do is I have it in grayscale. Now, sometimes I do have to change it back into color. So, in my practice, a lot of parents text us pictures of their rashes, and it's pretty hard to be like, is that eczema or chickenpox or impetigo? What is that? From a grayscale picture. It's not the perfect. So what you can do is you can set up a quick shortcut that turns it to grayscale and then turns it back off grayscale. I'll do on my Dear Parents blog a deeper dive into how to actually do that. I mean, you can find YouTube videos. You can ask an AI agent, like, how do I turn it into grayscale and all those sorts of things. So, but what I found is I'll get in stretches where this grayscale sticks, but then I have to keep remembering to do it. But Apple at least has these really good automations where every 4 hours, if my phone is in color, it turns back to grayscale. And it does that over and over. So even though I might flip it out to color from time to time, it goes back into grayscale. What I will tell you is that it will be really hard to look at your screen in color once you've put it into grayscale. It feels like an oversweetened beverage. It feels like you've been drinking, black coffee, and now you're getting the Java chip Frappuccino or something like that. It's hard to look at it again when it's back in color. It's a weird phenomenon. The other thing that we do is that we lock ourselves out of social media and other distracting apps after a certain period of time. Now, it's really easy to just go into your own screen time settings and set, like, I only want 30 minutes of Instagram per day or something along those lines. And then it brings up the warning, and then you just dismiss it, or you give yourself the rest of the day. So what we've done to prevent that from happening is we have it locked out so that when the time is up, you're actually locked out, and you have to put in a passcode, and it's a passcode that I don't have. So my wife has my passcode. I have her passcode. And so if I want more Instagram time, I actually have to be like, hey, I need some more time on Instagram. Can you unlock this for me? Now, obviously, you're going to do this with somebody that you trust and that it's an accountability person for you that you feel comfortable with, being like, okay, there are very few Instagram emergencies. And so I probably don't need to do that on a regular basis. But once I'm out of Instagram time, I would have to go ask her to do that. And there's the accountability and also the, like, you're a busy dad. Why do you need to be on Instagram anymore, or TikTok, or whatever it might be? You don't actually need more of that time. And so then you're completely locked out. You just can't do it. And there's such a relief that comes from being like, okay, I'm done with that. It just can't take away from the presence anymore. And so it's done being a distraction for you. And it feels great actually the rest of the day, because it's like, can't do it. There's nothing to tug me back because I have literally no access. What I always have parents do is put these parameters in place for 2 weeks. Use the grayscale, use the lockout. You can also get, like, there's apps and devices. There's the brick device that I see on social media from time to time too. These devices that lock you out permanently, whatever it takes, whatever works for you and for your workflow to be locked out and have those apps completely unavailable is what's going to be best. And whatever you can do consistently is going to be best. Do that for 2 weeks and see how your presence changes. See how you're being present for yourself, your sleep, your peace of mind changes, because you didn't miss a lot on the news. Even though you missed a lot on the news, you didn't actually miss a lot on the news. And then look at how it affects your relationships with your child, your spouse, your friends, your family, and you will see the benefit. And most people will see the benefit. And if you have these things in place that make it so that it's permanent, then it's not going to continue to be this thing that festers back up over and over. Now, if you want more help, if you want more guidance around screens, I do have this comprehensive plan for you and for your kids' screen time. It's called the Screen Reset. And it really just helps to put screens in their proper place as a tool. That doesn't mean that we just, outlaw screens or say no screens, but it does help to put them in the place as a tool. Screens are a tool in the same way that a chainsaw is a tool. A chainsaw is not used at the dinner table for cutting our steak. A chainsaw stays in the garage, but when we have the need for a chainsaw, it's a great tool and it makes life easier and it makes work better and all those sorts of things. It's kind of fun too. But we don't use a chainsaw all the time. And so we don't need to have our screens constantly available for every use case and every down moment of boredom. So the Screen Reset is really, it's a guided journey that's over text message. So there's no course logins or anything along those lines. You're busy and it's hard to keep up with those and everything like that. What instead happens is every day I send you a text message with a little tiny learning point and piece of homework for you to do that incrementally snowballs into having a really good relationship with screens, both for you and for your child and for your whole family. Parents get their time back, they get their control back, and it feels like things are moving more smoothly and it's not a constant source of stress or frustration that we can live with screens rather than have screens control us. The link to that reset is in the show notes, and it's a great way for families to get a handle on their screens. But I hope that you'll take if nothing else, the Grayscale, which is super easy to set up, and the Lockout, and use those and see and intentionally take into consideration what happens when we have a plan around our screens and we're actually putting them in their place. So we're using them, but they're not leading us. This, like Alex says, this isn't daycare. You get to decide. And it's much easier when the tech companies have less of a hold over what you think about and where you spend your time and energy and attention. Answering parents' questions is literally what I do all day long. And I like to get to answer questions that come in. And if you have a question, you can sure go to dearparents.substack.com, submit your question, and it will be one of the ones that I talk about in an upcoming podcast or video. Today, we have a question about sleep, and it's specifically a 2-3-year-old that is really struggling to get to the point where they can sleep independently. And I just want this mom to get to unspool for you what she's facing, and then I'll talk through what my approach would be with helping to get to a better place for the family with their sleep.
Hi, I just read your Substack about how to sleep train a 2-year-old or almost 2-year-old. My question is, it all makes sense, and it's the process we've been following with our almost 3-year-old. My challenge is we suspect my almost 3-year-old is neurodivergent, and sometimes our presence in his room is not calming or reassuring. It's like an invitation to continue to play. Mom or dad is there, even if we are mostly ignoring him, even if we are trying to just be a calm, non-engaged presence. It doesn't seem to help. Wondering what your suggestion would be in that case, where maybe you're dealing with a kid that is neurodivergent, possibly on the spectrum, and who doesn't seem to be calmed by a parent's presence, but is instead, he is calmed by our presence, but like also calmed and excited that we are in there with him. And sometimes we've thought, okay, maybe we didn't put him in his bed tired enough. We try to stick to a pretty consistent routine. Sometimes we just put him in and close the door. That doesn't usually go very well either. So just trying to figure out a routine that works well. He has been not in a crib for probably about 8 months now, I guess. Right around 2 years old is when he started climbing out of his crib. So he'll be 3 in February. So we're almost to a year out of his crib. So he can get up in and out of bed, which adds to some of the complexity here. So anyway, if you have any ideas, would love your thoughts. Thanks so much.
My child, I want them to go to sleep on their own, but they're really struggling to stay in their room. And I know that there are so many parents out there that just constantly are putting the kid back and putting the kid back and putting the kid back. And it adds to your frustration and stress. It adds to the child's stress and frustration. It becomes a vicious cycle, and everybody's tired and overtired, and it can be really challenging for parents to deal with. In the big picture, what I say, and I think what she was referencing there for my Substack, is camping. Camping is a great strategy for parents that don't want to lock their kid in the room, which who does, but want to get to a place where they can say, "Night, little Timmy," and then they can leave the room and expect 0 to 2 comebacks. But then Timmy stays in his room. He gets to sleep. Parents get to sleep. It's not like the constant nightly battle that a lot of parents, ourselves included, have been in over the years. And so my first approach when you're telling me that your child is calmed by your presence, but also excited, hey, my parents are in my room, I want to play host, let's play some games here, people, is first and foremost, by and large, I think that a lot of the issues that we face are because as parents, we are worried about practicing outside of normal situations. I don't want to bring up this sort of thing because I don't want to draw attention to it. I don't want to remind them of a difficult moment we had in the past because then we'll be drawing attention to it. When in reality, if we say, hey, remember that time you were upset the other day about this, that, or the other thing? Let's talk through that, or let's figure out how to move through that more. If we say, okay, hey, we get to practice this every night. Who wants to do more time practicing going to bed? But if we practice during the day of getting comfortable with, hey, we can be in my room and my parents are present, but they're not playing with me. And this isn't some sort of novelty that happens every night, but instead this is just a normal thing where my parents are in the room, I'm doing some blocks, I'm reading, I'm coloring, I have some time to get over the novelty of the guests showing up in my room. And I think that makes a big difference. So my suggestion would be to practice bedtime outside of bedtime, which means we go into the room. Hey, let's pretend that we're going to bed. I'm going to sit here on the floor. I got my book. What are you going to do? And you can let your child have that time to just work out that novelty and excitement of having the parent in the room, so that it becomes boring and unexciting that that my parent is in the room, because this is a normal everyday occurrence. I don't know about you. I know that a lot of us as children grew up spending a lot more time in our room, and our kids don't spend all that much time in their room. Sometimes they'll go up and color and play, especially our middle girls will go play and color. And one of our kids is really into paper chain countdowns, and she's very crafty. And you go into her room and there are at least 6 or 7 different paper chain countdowns going on at any moment. And then at bedtime, part of her process is going around to all the countdowns and taking off a day. She's got her birthday. She's got my birthday. She's got April Fool's Day coming up. She's got, I can't remember what the other ones are, our summer vacation, which is a really long paper chain. She's got all these different countdowns that she's doing. And so if you can get into the habit, all that to say is they don't spend a lot of time in their rooms otherwise. If you can get into the habit of spending time in their room outside of bedtime, I think that takes the cool and the novelty factor out of it. It just becomes normal and less exciting. So that would be my first thing to do when it comes to working through, hey, this is so fun and novel that my parent is in my room. I want to play with them. I want to jump on the bed. I want to get them involved in my toys and those sorts of things, because I haven't been doing that a lot of the other time. One thing that you had said, which was the question of the overtiredness. Now, for me, when I think about overtired, I think we're wild and wired, but we are also really struggling. And so we have moments of excitement and joy, and then we have moments of big struggles. Now, one of the things that I always do, especially if we're talking about a child that is maybe neurodivergent, like the mom said, or a pickier eater, is, are there any biological things contributing to our wired but tired in the evening? And I've talked about this on my Substack on an article, or it was an iron and ADHD workshop, but it applies to broader spectrum of patients than just ADHD. But one specific thing that we know is that as your child's circadian rhythm detects bedtime, the circadian rhythm actually turns down the dopamine tone. And when our dopamine tone gets turned down more, what happens is we have more of what looks like dopamine-seeking behavior, because our baseline level has dropped as we prepare for bedtime. So we're doing bigger things. It feels like they're attention-seeking, or they're trying novelty, or trying to get a rise out of us, because that is dopamine-seeking, because our dopamine tone lowers as we get closer and closer to bedtime. Now, one of the things that impacts that is iron. If we have low ferritin, not just iron like hemoglobin, but if we have low iron levels as measured by a ferritin, then what that means is our brain might not have enough iron to get enough dopamine to the different areas of the brain that are necessary for calm, necessary for good decision making, necessary for pausing, necessary for emotional regulation, and making choices and planning and organizing and doing all the different things that dopamine does for us in our brain. If our iron level is low, that will actually contribute to the conversion, or the limited conversion, of tyrosine into L-DOPA. There's a tyrosine hydroxylase that converts tyrosine into dopamine, and it's iron dependent. So if our iron levels are low, this is a long story of this biochemical digression, is if our iron levels are low as measured by a ferritin, that can make it hard in the evenings because our dopamine tone drops down and we look wired, but we're tired. And then overnight, when it comes to restless sleep, if we have low ferritin, that is associated with restless leg syndrome. So if you have the child that is tossing and turning, that falls asleep, but then the pillows are all over the place, the blankets are all twisted up, or they're all over their bed, that's another reason that you might want to check into that, because they might be getting to sleep, but they might not be getting as restorative sleep because of their iron level. Digression into iron, which is an interest and place of mind where I find that a lot of children are a little bit low, not on their hemoglobin, like they're not anemic, but their ferritin level is low, which means they're not getting enough iron in their brain, which means it's affecting dopamine levels, whether or not you have ADHD. So that might be something just to look into in terms of the sleep camp, and then make sure that there are other biological things. Another thing that I often find is helpful for families, especially if we have a neurodivergent child, is magnesium. Magnesium is involved in a lot of the processes for serotonin synthesis, and so that contributes to our calm. It's not a medicine that makes your child sleepy, but it does allow their brain and body to calm down enough that sleep can come. And so that's something that I think is worth investigating as well. Now, what my big picture approach would be, if this were me, what I would do is I would practice in the room, and then I would get comfortable with my child being present, doing their thing in their room. Rather than you have to stay in your bed, you have to stay in your bed, do not get out of your bed, get back in your bed, that sort of thing. I would get comfortable with them in their room because they're not in a crib anymore. So they can have free reign of their room, and you're going to turn their room essentially into a little crib. It's a safe place for them to play and explore. And then when they're tired, they can lay down in bed. What I would do is I would camp. So I would sit by their bed. I would have my book or my Kindle. I would not have my regular iPhone out because that's too distracting and bright and all the different things. But I like to read. I would get bored. I would do either an audiobook or my Kindle, and I would just sit there and read while they do their thing. Okay, the novelty of having my parent in the room has worn off, and I'm going to meander around, and then I'll get tired. Maybe my mom will tuck me in. You don't have to completely ignore them, but I wouldn't give them a lot of attention or a lot of input that's going to get them excited that my parent is wanting to wait. Are they wanting to play all of a sudden? No. And then what I would do is I would practice that, and that will take some time. And we can talk about it during the day. We can talk it up during the day of how good last night went or how things went better last night, what went well, and then talk about what's coming up this evening. And this is a couple-week process to get them used to, okay, this doesn't have to be high stakes. My parent is not going to go away. They're also not going to yell and scream at me to get back into my room and those sorts of things. I can find novelty, dopamine, attention elsewhere, and this is going to become less of a thing. Now, what you do over time is they get comfortable falling asleep on their own and staying in their bed on their own, and you move your camping away. You might be right next to their bed at first. You then might be across the room. You might be in the doorway. You might be in the hallway. Those are ways that you work back, and hey, you're doing good, bud. Keep up the good work. I was all the way over here, or I had to go check on something, and then I came back, and you were still in your room. I had to go check on the laundry. I had to move the laundry over, and I came back and you were asleep. What progress you've made. That's awesome. I'm so glad that you're able to sleep and snuggle with your stuffies and those sorts of things. Now, sometimes people stall out on the last step of that because the child just wants to come out and check on them. And so one thing that you can do is, like I said before, this is a big crib, right? You've taken the guardrails off the crib. They're able to explore their room, but you want the room to be a safe place, and maybe also a little bit of a mini crib, is you can put a baby gate in the doorway with the door open so that they don't inadvertently wander out, because that might be enough to get them to stop. And maybe you're positioned outside of that for a spell, so they get used to, hey, okay, I have to stay in my big crib now, but my parent is right out there. And so that might be the last step of camping. Now, we did this, and one of our kids would climb over it. And so we had two baby gates on top of each other at one point so that he wouldn't climb out. And then one time I went upstairs. I'll have to find this picture. I have it somewhere. But he kicked in the bottom baby gate. So the top baby gate was up there just suspended seemingly in midair. The bottom baby gate was down, and he was hiding in an empty bathtub upstairs, trying not to find us, or trying to hide from us. And so there's all the different, this works for me, this doesn't work for you. But hopefully that has given you some ideas of how to help them. I think the biggest thing is practicing, making it unexciting, getting them used to, and getting them lots of wins under their belt of what it looks like to have a good bedtime routine. We did our calm down routine. We winded down. My parent was with me for a little bit. I got into bed. I fell asleep without being rocked or cuddled or sleeping in my parents' bed or anything like that. And that takes time, but once you get that, it makes such a dramatic difference for you as a parent and for your child, both in their sleep confidence, for their sleep, for your sleep. It is a win, and it is worth the time and attention. Get an audiobook, get a Kindle, something that you can do to occupy your brain, or just sit and be present, and then have that time with your child, and you will remember that. So the last thing that I'll say, I know that I've meandered on, is we used to do this with one of our kids, and it took a long time at nap time because she still needed a nap, and we had to camp with her at nap time, and we would just sit by her bed and hold her hand, and then we're not holding her hand but just nearby. And I remember those times as getting to help her to fall asleep at nap time, and I think about that now versus trying to hold the door shut or just yelling at them or those sorts of things. The connection, the memories of just sitting by her while she drifted off to sleep is something that's really sticks in my mind, sticks as a nice memory of her and how we were able to help her to get to that point where now we just say night or go take a nap or see you in the morning, that sort of thing. And she stays in her bed. So there is progress, but it does take time and tension. All right. So hopefully this has been a helpful episode and has given you a lot to chew on when it comes to protein, when it comes to distraction, and when it comes to helping your kids sleep if that's trouble for you. Now, I would love to continue the conversation over on my Substack where you can ask your questions, get more support, and learn more about how to help your child to thrive. dearparents.substack.com or check the link in the show notes. Keep up the good work.